Good morning. We are doing the square root property, page 1. I've got 3 of these pages for you. Let's start by the definition of the square root property. X to the second power equals k, the number k. What does it mean? It means that x without the second power is equal to plus or minus the square root of k. In other words, x squared equals k means that x is going to be equal to the square root of k, or x is going to be equal to the negative square root of k. And we use this property in order to get rid of the square in an equation. Now here's our first example. Example 1, solve x squared minus 81 equals 0. So the idea is that there's an x squared in this equation, but there's no x. So this is actually a very easy equation to solve since there's no x. We can use the square root property. Step 1 for the square root property says to isolate the x squared in the equation. So to do that, we're going to take x squared minus 81 equals 0, and we're going to move the 81 to the other side by add 81 to both sides, and that will give you x squared equals positive 81. That's a result of adding 81 to both sides. Now that we've isolated the expression that's being squared, we can apply the square root property by just taking plus or minus the square root of both sides. So on the left side, when we take the square root of x squared, all we get is x. And we don't even put the plus or minus on that side. We put it on the other side of the equal sign. So we took the square root of the left side, and that's equal to plus or minus the square root of the other side. But the square root of 81 is the number whose second power is equal to 81. So I shouldn't be saying it yet. I want to do it in the next step. But we're just about finished. We just need to do step 3. Step 3 says to simplify to finish it. Well, the square root of 81 is 9. So that means that that expression, that equation says that x is equal to plus or minus 9. And I'm going to put a box around this answer. I just want you to be thinking when you see this, what does she mean by that? She means that x is equal to 9, or union, x is equal to negative 9. That's what the plus or minus means. Okay, moving on to the next example. Each of these examples are going to get challenging, more challenging progressively. Here we have w squared minus 6 equals 14. Same step. Step 1, isolate the guy that's being squared. Now it's not x this time, it's w. We're going to isolate the w squared. We're going to do that by adding 6 to both sides of the equal sign. Here the 6's cancel and we get w squared equals 14 plus 6 is 20. Step 2, now we're going to apply the square root property by taking plus or minus the square root of both sides of this equation. When we take it on the left side, it just gives us w. When we take it on the right side, bring down the equal sign, it's going to be the plus or minus, don't forget that, the square root of 20. Okay. So now there's only one thing left to do, and that is to simplify the radical if possible. So we're looking at square roots here, so you have to ask yourself, are there any perfect square factors embedded in the number 20? So yeah, see, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that 20 is actually the same as 4 times 5. And that 4, that's a perfect square. It's the result of 2 squared. So that's where I'm going in the last step, step 3. W equals plus or minus. Now I'm going to factor out the perfect square 4 times, and then I'm leaving whatever's left, the 5, behind in the radical sign, under the radical sign. And now I'm going to evaluate the square root of the perfect square. So it's w equals plus or minus 2 times the square root of 5. And now I'm almost ready to box my answer. I'm just going to ask myself, is there any more perfect square factor hidden? Are there any more hidden in the 5 that I could bust out of that radical sign? And the answer is no. There's no other perfect square factors. So here are our answers. You notice I said our. Here are, because there's more than one. There's the positive 2 square root of 5, and there's the negative 2 square root of 5. When you cannot simplify the entire answer, in other words, you can't pull all of the numbers out from under the radical sign, you know your answer has a special name. Those kind of answers that have radicals that can't be simplified, they're called irrational answers. Whatever they're called, there it is. There are 2 solutions.